What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Links and Locks Best Bets podcast presented by Bet365. I'm Jason Sobel from the Action Network. He is Ben Everill from the PGA Tour. As always, we will play 18 holes, make 18 bets for this week's Hayden's Bank Houston Open, a new title sponsor at Memorial Park Municipal Golf Course in Houston this week. Benny, what's going on? How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Must say, I didn't necessarily expect what we saw last week there in Mayakoba with Russell Henley just dominating pretty much from start to finish. I remember, you know what, it was funny in pre-tournament talk, and when I was doing my research, I picked up his results there, and I saw them. I thought, I thought he had played well there before, and I sort of dismissed it when I saw his previous results in Mayakoba, and I'd forgotten about the year that he got dinged the 8 shots for playing the wrong ball because he was playing pretty well.
Right.
He was playing pretty well that year, and I was around. That's why, I'd second guessed my own memory and just looked at the numbers. Sometimes you've got to really dig down and get into the annals of your own brain. But look, more power to him. He ran the table pretty much. So that means we've got to find some value this week, right? At the Houston Open. We've got to pretty much try to find something to get some cash back.
Yeah, absolutely. And Henley, and to an extent, Brian Harman, who came in second place, solo second last week. Those are the two guys I've said more than any others over the last 18 to 24 months, Benny, that they haven't necessarily gotten the results out of their performance.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I liken it almost to a pitcher in Major League Baseball who has a 6-10 record, but a 2.89 ERA. And you're like,
yeah,
he's throwing the ball really well. He's just not getting wins. And so those who study analytics and those who know the numbers understand that this is something, it sounds oxymoronic. They call it in the business positive regression. And so essentially what I think we saw from Russell Henley was 4 days of positive regression this past weekend where, and to an extent, like I said, Brian Harman as well. They finally just, hey, I'm playing well, and I finally got the results that I deserved out of some really good play for a while. So happy for Russell Henley. We'll try to find a couple of winners this week. And as a reminder, the Links and Locks podcast, proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. Let's get right into it. As always, playing 18 holes, making 18 bets. Benny Everill, you're on the tee. Swing away.
All right, I'm going to give you my first arrow of the week, and I'm going back to the well after he did not cash for us last week. I want you to look at Aaron Wise at plus 1,600 or roundabout. You'll find Aaron Wise. Look, I think he was 15th in the end at Mayakoba, showed some flashes, but as I said earlier, was just sort of run over the top of by what Henley was able to do all week. He's had a couple of top 15s in the last few months. In 2 trips to Memorial Park, he's been T11, T26. I'm looking for some value down the board. I'll talk about sort of Scheffler and Burns in a little while, but Aaron Wise, I want to go back there. I think he's still trending in the right direction. I want to have a little nibble at 1,600.
So a couple of things here, Benny. First of all, I think it's a very worthy question this week. If I was to give you one of the top 4 players, or give you any of the top 4 players on the board. So I'll give you Scotty Scheffler, Sam Burns, Tony Finau, and Aaron Wise, and I take the rest of the field. What are you doing there?
Oh man, that's actually a really tough one this week. I think there's merit in all those top 4. I would not be surprised at all if it comes from that group that you just mentioned. But at the same, you want to show, I mean, this is sitting on the fence. I'm going to get splinters in my backside here, but there is significant value because of those 4 so tight at the front beyond. Right. So that is essentially the theme I'm sort of running with today. People will notice I will throw in spots to think about Finau and Scheffler, etc. I think you're a little bit silly not to, keep an eye on those guys, but it also speaks to me as a week where we might find some value because those 4 are so tight at the top.
And that's what I'm looking at. I did write up Burns and even Scheffler as DFS plays in my preview this week. I think they have more value there than they do necessarily in the outright marketplace. Doesn't mean they can't win, though. And like I said, I would have to think long and hard about it on either side. Either it's the top 4 or the rest of the field. As for the rest of the field, what I'm looking at this week, I know people are going to say, well, it's a 7,000-yard golf course. It's just, get it out there and keep it in the fairways, and it's not long. It's necessarily the case. This is a par 70 that has
Mm-hmm.
5 par 3s on it. You're going to find 8 holes of 478 yards or longer. And what I've found in doing my research over the last 2 years with Memorial Park hosting this event is that the better drivers of the golf balls, not necessarily have to be long, not necessarily straight, but you have to drive it really well. The guys who drive the ball really well tend to find some success here. Those are the guys that I'm chasing, and you'll find that most of my 9 bets today will be guys who drive it well. And I will start that out with a long shot play for the second hole this week. And I've got 2 guys as long shots. I'll hold on to one of them. The other one I'll give you right now, Trey Mullinax, who won not that long
Oh,
ago, and certainly has played some better golf, had some better results since that win, which freed him up a little bit. I think Mullinax is a guy that's probably a better player than most people realize at 130 to 1. I've got another 130 to 1 play later for you in the pod, but at 130 to 1, I think Mullinax has some win equity this week.
well, mate, I'm going to echo what you were saying there in terms of like this is a different test this week to what we've been seeing. Like you mentioned, Pastor, they're going to play it at 7,400 this year. 7,412, I think, yards for this past 70 is the official scorecard. That's not too shabby for a past 70. Like it's out there, and it's also played a little tougher than what we've seen the last few weeks. Like we've seen the 20 unders, etc. The winning scores here, I believe, are like 13 and 10 under over these last 2 years at this course, or something close to that. Plays a lot, sort of more of a grind than what the players that have been playing these last few weeks are used to. So while I always take current form into consideration, this week is one where that may not be as heavy as other weeks, given that it has a distinct play towards those sort of guys who can get the ball out there and sort of grind away from there as well. So we do have the same sort of mindset. And you mentioned a long shot, so I'm going to run straight up to one of my long shots. So I'm going to give you. I've got one guy that's a half long shot, like a 50 to 1 or so long shot, and then I've got a couple of guys in the 100 to 1 and further. What do you want, the 50s or the hundreds coming
Give me
up
the
first?
hundreds, because I got one more 100 that I'll follow it with.
All right. I'm going to go with 2 guys who are just bombers and who have shown they can win on the PGA Tour, right? And that's Luke List and Cameron Champ. Guys who haven't necessarily played great in the last few weeks, etc., but who on their day, if they get the ball out there, manage to keep it on the map somewhat, and not get into too much trouble, should find themselves ahead of a lot of the field in bringing their approach shots in. If they can control those and jag a few putts. We know that Cameron Champ, every time he wins, it's from 100 to 1 or more. So he's due one of those 4 wins again, just out of nowhere. And Luke Lister said another big bomber who can get it done there. Now, this is a theme for me, as I said, going through all my other picks later. So it'll give you an idea where I'm going. But I'm going to say that those 2 in the triple digits, Luke List and Cameron Champ, are ones you can keep an eye on.
I mentioned each of them in my preview this week. Those guys absolutely fit the profile that I'm looking at. Very high ceilings and low floors for each of those guys. So not for the faint of heart, but if you're betting them, you might as well bet them outright. Those are not safe, conservative plays where you say, well, I'll play a little top 20 on Champ and Lists. Like if you're going to bet them, you might as well bet them to win. I mentioned that I have another triple digit long shot. I was going to save them, but let's get into it here on the 4th hole. How about Dylan Fratelli? And I have no idea how to figure out Dylan Fratelli, Benny. He won the John Deere Classic about 3 years ago. Since then, he's got exactly 2 top 5 finishes on the PGA Tour. They came at the Masters and the Open Championship. How do you explain it? I don't know. Maybe he plays his best golf in tougher conditions. Maybe he needs to be motivated in a certain way, or maybe it's just the curtain sort of opening up and showing us that he has that kind of potential. I tend to think it's the latter. I tend to think that that Fratelli can be a guy who is a top 20, top 25 player in the world at some point. He gained a lot of distance a couple of years ago. He has maintained that. And so he's a guy on a golf course where you have to drive it really well that I tend to like a lot. And again, 130 to 1 for Fratelli this week outright.
All right. I can't argue it because you're thinking along the same lines I am, and I just feel like this week could throw one of these guys out there, and you'll see I've got more of them in other spots. Guy, here we go. I'll give you this one. Another sort of mid-range long shot is a guy that you love. I'm sure you may well come into thinking for you at some point in this pod even. But what about Keith Mitchell at 50 to 1? Guy who's very good strokes gained off the tee. Tends to be around when the big guns fire, when it can be a little tougher. I feel like I saw that number there and thought that could be some value, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on Keith Mitchell at around 50 to 1.
I really like Keith Mitchell this week. It, again, fits the profile, just hasn't been playing his best golf. Here's my deal with Keith Mitchell. And like you said, I mention him every single time he's playing. He's a guy that I don't want to miss on, because I do think that at some point he's going to pop and those odds will start getting shorter and shorter on a regular basis. So I don't want to miss on him, but the recent results aren't quite where I'd like him to be. That said, could he surprise? Absolutely. So he is certainly on my list. And like I said, I wrote him up in the preview this week as well. He fits the profile. Getting to the 6th hole, Benny, another guy that I mention all the time, doesn't necessarily fit that same profile of driving it really well. Just kind of does everything really well. But doesn't this feel like it could be a Sahith Theegala breakthrough week?
Yes.
Yeah, Theegala I've got for a top 5 at plus 700. I didn't even know this before I started talking about him, but my PGA Tour radio co-host Michael Collins told me on the show today that I guess Theegala is set up a home base in Houston, and so he should be very comfortable in the area this week playing a home game for him. So if indeed that is the case, I didn't know that, but Theegala for a top 5 this week.
Mate, well, we might as well go straight there. I have him right down here on my pad, top 5, so hit Theegala.
Wow.
A couple of top 10s of recent times. I think his game just suits, his all-round game suits this golf course. So he's got some form coming in. He's played well at Valspar, which is sort of a course that you might want to make an equation between the two courses this week if you're looking to sort of stretch and find something similar. So yeah, I just feel like he's coming off, I said, a rest as well. Other guys are coming in from Mexico. Theegala, this could be the week. Like, I've got him top 5, but if you're going to go top 5, you might as well throw a unit or two on outright as well. This could be his breakthrough week for sure. I've got him written down. He just fell out of my top 2 barely. So top 5.
Benny, speaking of courses that should have a correlation to Memorial Park, and remember, don't go back too far. This is just the third year that this course is hosting this event, and the first 2 winners are now playing live. The first year we saw Carlos Ortiz win at this one with 3 other live players right behind him. Last year was Jason Kokrak. He had a bunch of live players in the top 20 behind him. And so I'm not really looking much at the previous results other than guys that drive it well. And so the one course I looked at Data Golf, Benny, and this won't be my pick right here, but remember that name, Brendan Steele, who's one of the better drivers of the golf ball. Texted with him earlier. He's never been there before, so he's anxious to go see the golf course. But the correlation course, as far as Data Golf has shown, is that their website says Southern Hills is the closest correlation to Memorial Park. The only player in the top 10 at the PGA Championship at Southern Hills earlier this year who is playing in the field this week is Brendan Steele. So watch out for him. But that said, I will get to the 8th hole, and I'll give you my top 10 play for this week. A guy who, as soon as the odds came out, I thought there was tremendous value on. Now, I will admit that he is various numbers across the board. So shop around and find a good one in your book for it. But for a top 10, a guy with a win and 2 runner-up finishes in the last 8 months alone, guy that fits the profile, I'm going with Big Ox, Sepp Straka, who has played some really good golf. And Benny, you're starting to laugh because I have a feeling Sepp Straka is somewhere on that card that you got in front of you.
Yeah, again. I had him at top 20. Good value. I think I saw it between 280, 350 in some places. Top 20, Sepp Straka. Look, he since like losing the playoff at Sanderson, he might not have had his best, but he was a T5 here in 2020, I think. I wrote down, and it just said this again. You're right. This is a course that suits his game, and he's got you know, he's got the chip on his shoulder. He knows he can compete against the best in the world. He's proven it. So yeah, mate, I've got to just follow you in again. But instead of top 10, I had him in top 20, Sepp Straka.
For new listeners to this podcast who don't realize this, Benny and I don't talk at all, other than sending
That's
text
right.
messages saying, "Hey, what time you want to record?" We don't talk about the picks. He doesn't read my stuff. I don't read his stuff. We get on here, we start talking, and invariably, this is what happens on a very regular basis. We end up having a lot of the same plays, so that's a good thing. I always think, not a bad thing. If we're in concert on some of these picks, then it means we are thinking in the same way. So that was the ninth hole. As we make the turn, another quick reminder that the Links and Locks podcast is proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 for free. We make the turn, Benny, go to the 10th hole. And as I like to do, I like to start the 10th hole every week with a first-round leader play. I've got a guy who, again, fits the profile, a guy who's two best clubs in the bag are his driver and his putter. And if the irons are just good, we say this a lot about a lot of ball strikers. Hey, if he just putts average or a little bit better than average, he's going to have a good week. If Wyndham Clark just hits the irons pretty well, he's got a good chance. He opened with a 66 at this event last year. That was one off the first round lead. And I went back and looked, 29 individual starts on the PGA Tour last season. He opened with scores sub 70 on 16 different occasions. This is a guy who goes low to start his tournaments on a regular basis. 70-1, Wyndham Clark for the first round leader bet.
All right, mate. Well, 11th hole, they say that if you know, the definition of crazy is, you know, keeping on doing the same thing with expecting a different result. But I'm going to go one more time, or at least one more time here with this theory of first round leader going with the chalk to try to get the better odds there. So this is where, again, I have you looking at the likes of Scheffler, Burns, and Tony Finau. You're obviously going to get a little bit better odds than what you get for the entire tournament. There is a chance that one of those four just goes lights out all week and takes this thing down. I don't want to get on Scheffler at 550 or 600 at the start, even though he's probably going to be right there amongst it the entire week. So with that being said, you go on him for that first round lead in case he does go out with a 63. If he doesn't, hopefully you're going to jump on him for your outright play after round one and get him at slightly better odds than you're getting at the start of the week. So that's my theory again. Hasn't paid off the last few weeks, but I'm going to go with it one more time.
I like that. I think that's a smart idea, getting some value in some of the bigger names there. We get to the 12th hole, and this is a name that I know you're going to like this one, Benny. A lot of experts in the industry have been picking this player ever since he got his PGA Tour card. He's a veteran on the DP World Tour. The results so far have been solid. He was fourth at the Sanderson Farms, 32nd and 37th in his two starts since then. I've been waiting for this one. He is a world-class driver of the golf ball. I'll go very conservatively top 20, but Dean Burmester has the type of game where he can go out and win on this golf course. I think he's a really good player. He's shown that he's a really good player on other tours. It's not a typical rookie who's 22, 23, 24 years old. This guy who's been around the block a little bit, knows how to play his golf at plus 240 for a top 20. Again, very conservative play, but I do like that.
No, you know what, mate? This is the name. Like last week, you threw a name at me that caught me by surprise. I didn't go deep enough in my research, and he turned up to be playing really well early, and that was Lingmerth. This week, that is a name, Burmester. I should have noticed that. I haven't. I am going to back you on that 100%. This is the type of place for him, for sure. If I went back and readjusted, I'd probably find a spot for him somewhere. But as it stands, I'll give you a top 10 play for some value. Now, I'm going to preface this and say, I think that there is definite value in outright, 5, 10, 20, whatever you want to do. Okay. This guy is a guy that, come the end of last year, gained a huge confidence boost out of joining a particular team in the President's Cup, that being the international team. I think this guy is going to win at some point soon, and this golf course sets up for his game, and that's the Canadian Taylor Pendrith. Plus 450, Taylor Pendrith top 10. Oh, you're now Jason's showing me his card, so clearly he's on I've got ahead of him. The first time in this pod this week, I'm ahead of him with a pick. But I'm guessing, Jace, you agree with Taylor Pendrith, who, as I said, like, look, he just has the game for this. And the confidence he got out of being in the national team, I think is going to, see him prevail at some point this season.
Benny, I do not agree with you yet,
Oh.
but I will later on in the podcast. If you get my drift, I will be talking about him in just a little bit. Yes, suffice to say, I do like that play a lot. All right, we get to the 14th hole, and another guy that I like on a regular basis, and haven't liked him lately because he has missed 3 cuts in a row, but he's 200-1 in the outright market. I'm taking a little sprinkle there. It's more of a top 20, top 40 type of play. But Callum Tarrant is a guy that I've talked about on a fairly regular basis over the last 6 months on the podcast. There's reason to think that he can bounce back pretty quickly after those 3 missed cuts. In his 6 prior missed cuts, in the start after them, before this little stretch, he finished 13th missed cut, 22nd, 6th, 31st, and 7th. Essentially, what I'm trying to tell you is that when Callum Tarrant misses a cut, he usually bounces back pretty quickly. He hasn't from this little stretch here, but there's reason to believe that he won't start slumping right away. And so I do think he's going to start playing some better golf soon. Again, another guy whose game should fit this golf course.
Yeah, another one that I should have maybe picked up when I was going through my list. Definitely a guy that you could see pop up on this leaderboard. I'm going to give you a top 40 play here. Just trying to look for some value in some big names that may come out of nowhere again. Guys with some, power behind them. And that is Gary Woodland. Look, not necessarily the greatest form, as I said, coming in. I've talked about him a few times coming in, but what I do know is he's back doing some extra work, has been doing some good work with Butch, has been looking into bringing his game around. And I just don't, again, it's one of these ones where I don't want to miss out, like on the week that he does finally put it all together. So this was one of those courses that I penciled in once I talked to him pre the start of this new season. So I'm not going to jump off him now. I just will be a little conservative and look in that top 40, top 20 market for Gary Woodland.
Yeah, so I think that's a nice play. Again, another guy who knows how to get off the tee and fits that profile we're looking for this week. So as we get to the 16th hole, Benny, you mentioned I took David Lingworth last week. That was the easiest no sweat top 40 call that we've ever had. He finished in 8th place. He would have been a very nice top 10 valued play. I'm feeling a little invincible, indefatigable, indomitable. And so now I'm going deep down the list for a top 40. I checked the Corn Ferry driving stats from this previous season.
Love it.
Kevin Yu really fit the profile. I liked his game a lot. This is a guy who should play well on this golf course. The only little problem, he's not showing up this week. He's not playing. He's taking the week off. Okay. Have fun on your week off, Kevin. Hope you enjoy it. You probably could have finished top 10 at this event. The other guy that was up there, Davis Thompson. Really like his games. A little shorter in the marketplace than he probably should be. He also has that homecoming next week at RSM where he essentially grew up. And so I'm going to wait on Davis Thompson another week. The other guy that was up there, Brent Grant. Very good driver of the golf ball. He's missed 4 cuts in his first 5 starts as a PGA Tour member. Only 1 top 40 finish. But this is a guy who drives it really well. And again, if that's the metric that I'm going after this week, then I don't mind taking a chance on Brent Grant. Again, for a top 40, I'm not going to go overboard, but I'm feeling good with those top 40 long shots, Benny.
Well, while you're riding the heat, just stick with it, right? I love it. Look, as I said it from the very outset, I think this is a week where, with your smaller units especially, going for like top 40 players with value, just throw a few out there, throw a few small ones on good odds in those top 40s and stick to those guys can sort of get the ball out there. And you just might jag yourself a little bit of bank to work with. I think that should be a fun aspect of this week's play. Now, what are we at, 17?
We're at 17.
Here we go. Okay. My top outright. Last week, you may recall that I was trying to be a little cryptic on a player. Trying to say, let's not pick him this week, as in last week in Mexico. Let's move down the board. Well, here comes my man. Jason Day is going to come back into the winner's circle this week. He is going to win at 30 plus to 40 to plus to 1. He is finally ready to get himself back in the winner's circle on the PGA Tour. He is pretty long off the tee. He had a few wayward shots at Monaco, which, as you know, got him in the trouble that I may have suggested he might get in, but he still finished T21. Prior to that, T11, prior to that, T8. He is 4th this season on approach, which is out of this world for a guy who's never been inside the top, I want to say 100 for that over a season. But of recent times, he has found his ball striking. All he needs to do is have a reasonable week on the greens, which we've seen he is capable of doing. He was the #1 putter in the world for a long time. I am going to declare this is the week that Jason Day makes the new statement and pushes himself back into the top echelon of the game, as long as he stays healthy.
Finishing a share of 21st place last week. It's looking good for Jason Day. Look, Benny, you know him better than anybody else in this industry. And so if you're picking him this week, I think I might have to tail that as well, because Jason does seem like he's motivated, which I think that previously in his career, when he was still okay, even when he wasn't #1, but he was still, hey, I got everything I could need. And, I'm playing in October, November just to, stay sharp a little bit. I don't know that he was fully motivated. Right now, it seems like he's motivated. It seems like he wants to go out there and get back to the levels where, hey, I'm playing all the majors and I'm playing in all the big events and I'm a top 50 player once again. And I do think that he has that inspiration to get back there. I think that's a smart play.
Yeah, he was. I think I failed to mention he was also 7th, I believe, last year or the year before, playing at Memorial Park when he played there previously. So look, he's seen the course, he knows it, and I had a brief chat with him, and he seems very confident. I do intend to speak with him more tomorrow, which is Tuesday for everyone out there. If I am even more confident, I'll tweet that fact out. So keep an eye on my Twitter.
Make sure you follow Benny on Twitter. Then I will get to the 18th hole, and surprise, surprise, the name we mentioned already. I alluded to it that we would hear more about him later in the pod. Here it is, Taylor Pendrith.
Yes.
Guy's game we saw at the President's Cup. This guy is one of the best drivers of the golf ball in the game right now. In fact, Benny, between last season and this season, there are 7 players who are top 20 both of these seasons in strokes gained off the tee. 4 of them are absolute superstars: Rory McIlroy, Patrick Cantlay, John Rahm, and Matt Fitzpatrick. One of them, another one, Keith Mitchell. We talked about him earlier. Guy drives it as well as anybody. The 6 players, Hayden Buckley. Hayden, if you're listening to the pod right now, what are you doing? How are you not in the field this week? You're eligible. You just decided to take a week off in a place that should really suit your game. Played well a few weeks ago, too. Not so great last week, but Hayden Buckley, what are you doing, dude? Play this thing. In any case, the 7th of those players is indeed Taylor Pendrith, one of the best drivers of the golf ball in the entire world. As you'll recall, this past season, he missed 4 months after the Players' Championship, a rib injury. When he returned, it was like he'd never left. He had 5 finishes of 13th or better in his final 6 starts of the season. Like I said, got him onto the President's Cup team. This is a guy who, as you mentioned earlier, Benny, it's not going to be very long before he wins one of these things. At 50 to 1, I'm taking a shot that it could be this week. Again, this is more of a mutual fund week than a one blue chip stock kind of week. This is one where I'll sprinkle here, I'll sprinkle there, but Pendrith is the first name on my card this week.
Yeah, mate, as I said, I'll back you there. And look, we did say if you'd missed the start or you've forgotten, we are not against the top 4 on this board. This is a very strong top 4 at the top. Easily could see one of them or both of them being like right up the top of the way through. But because of that, we definitely see some value out here. And he is one of the ones that screamed value to me. Pendrith, like the course suits him. He's going to be more motivated perhaps than anyone, outside of maybe Scotty Scheffler, who is the favourite for a reason. Runner-up last week, runner-up, I believe, at Memorial Park before, trying to get world #1 back. But if it's not going to be Sheff, these are the guys you need to look at if you want some value this week.
Yeah, again, one last time, Benny, you and I are on the same page. I know some people look at this golf course and say, well, it's not as long as I thought it would be, and we don't know too much. I get it. I'm looking for guys that can get themselves off the tee and give themselves a little advantage going into these long par 4 holes that we have in those 3 par 5s. I want to thank everybody out there for listening to this edition of the Links and Locks Best Bets pod presented by Bet365. Remember, you can find us anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Download, rate, subscribe, and listen every single week. For Ben Everill, I'm Jason Sobel. Good luck with all your bets for this week's Cadence Bank Houston Open. Here's hoping you hit the green.